Are you ready for the word? If you've got a Bible, turn to Exodus 12. If not, just listen real good. Exodus 12. Exodus 12, verse 1. Yahweh spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be Rosh Hodesh. It shall be the first month, Rishon Hodesh, of the year to you. Speak you unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And we talked about this many times. It doesn't say in the evening. It says betwixt or between the evenings. You shall kill it between the evenings. Tonight, I want to accomplish two things. One, I want to begin by briefly explaining why we're observing the month of Abib now instead of 15, 16 days from now, or 30 days from the time we began to observe it. And then I want to talk about the timeline of the crucifixion week of the Messiah. And my intent and hope is that we leave here with our hearts and our minds fully aware of how awesome and amazing that Yahshua is, and what our Messiah did for us, and how precise and powerful our Father is. All right? So let's talk about our calendar for a minute. We just read in Exodus 12:2 that Yahweh said, This month shall be the head month and the first month of the year for us. Every Torah observant group agrees that Abib is the first month of the year. There's no argument about that at all. And most agree that it is the chief month or the head month. It's the first month and it is the chief months. The disagreement is not on whether Abib is the first month of the year or not. The disagreement is over when you start that first month. And the best I can tell, there are three ways to determine when to start Abib. I am going to, excluding the Zadok or the Enoch calendar, the best I can tell, there are three different ways to determine when the month of Abib begins. Many use the Hillel II calendar, also called the Jewish calendar. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about that calendar. You can research it for yourself, Hillel, Hillel II. This calendar dates back to being initiated somewhere around the year 359. So it's been around a long time. It's a lunar solar calendar based upon mathematical computations rather than upon visual observations of barley or visual observations of the moon. It is merely a mathematical computation or calculations. Its purpose was to assist the Jews who had been dispersed so that they would have a working knowledge of when they were to celebrate the Moedim. Now that the temple is destroyed, they've been dispersed. The knowledge of exactly when to do it was going to be lost, so this calendar was created to help them. It's still widely used today. The second way that and the Hillel calendar will begin the month of Abib 16 days from now, 15 or 16 days from now. Then there are those who will not declare the month of Abib until after they have found barley in the Abib stage in Israel. Does anybody know what the Abib stage means? What they're talking about, barley in the Abib stage. That's where the month gets its name. Abib or Aviv, A-V-I-V or A-B-I-B, either way. But, say again? It's not quite ready for harvest yet, but it is fully grown. The seed is fully grown. It's just not completely mature yet. It's got starch in it, but it hasn't dried out yet. It's in that green state, fully grown, but still in a green state. Now, those who hold to this particular view will find barley that is in that Abib stage, and after they have found that, then they will begin to look for the next new moon to declare when Abib actually starts. Both of those approaches, both the Hillel 2 calendar and those who are waiting for barley to come into the Abib stage, both of them will mark Abib starting 16 days from now. They will not have started it 13 days ago like we did, okay? Which brings me to approach number 3. This approach is willing to declare Abib as having started as long as it is estimated that barley will reach the Abib stage before the month ends, okay? The second approach says until you see the barley in that stage, you can't look for the new moon. And let me pause and say this. I see a lot of merit in that approach. A lot of merit in that approach. I find no fault in that approach. There are times such as now when the spring equinox, the way it falls, it looks like that approach could be very accurate. I'm going to admit. The third approach says as long as barley reaches the Abib stage during the month, the first month of the year can begin before it reaches the Abib stage. And again, though I see merit in the other approach and cannot and will not find fault with anyone who establishes the Moedim that way, to this date, my understanding and convictions have caused me to embrace the third way, so that it's not completely tied to a visual of having to see something in Israel. Is the main reason that I have always just felt this approach was the better. However, after reading Exodus 11, 10 and 11 and seeing the plagues again, I'm having to reconsider it. But there are so many things that have made me go with this third approach. And let me tell you what those are. The spring equinox is declaring to me that a new year has begun. The daffodils are declaring to me a new year has begun, right? My peach trees and pear trees and apple trees are declaring to me that a new year has begun. The blooming flowers, the blossoming trees are all declaring that to me. So here is the humble point I am making. I do not know with 100% confidence that I am correct concerning this matter. I have to obey the scriptures based upon the understanding that I have at this time. If that understanding changes as I move forward, then I will change quickly, humbly, and without hesitation. However, I will also add this. Those who keep it later than we do, neither do they know with 100% confidence that they're correct. We're all doing the best we can with the knowledge that we have, with our desire to serve Yahweh. So what I have chosen to do is just rejoice that we have forsaken man-made, pagan-contaminated Christian holidays, and we have set our hearts and set our faces to keep Yahweh's holy feast. I'm going to choose to rejoice over that. Any questions or comments about that before we move on? All right. Now let's talk about the crucifixion week of our Messiah. The first time I actually saw this in Scripture, which was somewhere around 18, 20 years ago. The first time I saw this in Scripture, I was in complete awe, and I haven't gotten over it yet. Exodus 12:3 states clearly, on the 10th day of the first month, the lamb is to be brought into the home. I grew up in a Baptist church, and when I say grew up, I mean grew up. From a child up into my adulthood, I was in a Baptist church. I attended Sunday school. I attended training union. I was at Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night services, 3 services per week where sermons were preached. I served as fill-in preacher, interim preacher, full-time pastor in Baptist churches for many years. I went to Sanford University, a prestigious Baptist university, to get my degree in Baptist doctrine. I've listened to hours and hours and hours of Baptist teachings over many, many years. I later was involved in some of the most renowned Word of Faith ministries in America. And I have listened to hours and hours and hours of those teachings for many, many years. And not once did I ever see it on my own, nor did I ever hear anyone point it out in any lesson or sermon that I ever listened to, that Yahshua's triumphant entry took place on the 10th day of the first month. That's significant. And it ought to be known by those who serve Yahshua. That fact is abundantly clear, and it is of monumental importance. In order for him to be the Passover lamb, he had to fit the pattern perfectly, precisely, exactly, and that meant that he had to be brought into the home of the 10th day of the first month so that he could be slaughtered on the 14th day of the same month, or he wasn't the Messiah. So let's look at the amazing details given to us in the Gospels. John chapter 12. John 12 verse 1. Then Yahshua, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. Isn't that an awesome statement? He went to have dinner with Lazarus. He used to be dead, but he's not dead anymore, because Yahshua raised him from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him. That's beautiful. Powerful. But the point we're making tonight is in verse 1. 6 days before the Passover. What day's Passover? 14th day of the first month? 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. He's having dinner with Martha and Lazarus on the 9th day of the first month, called Abib. Read more. Drop down to verse 12. And on the next day, what day would that be? Oh. On the next day, much people that were come to the feast, when they heard that Yahshua was coming to Jerusalem, took branches of palm trees and went forth to meet him and cried, Hosanna! Blessed is the King of Israel that comes in the name of Yahweh. Hosanna! Blessed is the King of Israel that comes in the name of Yahweh. The Pharisees, the chief priests, the elders, the scribes all got bothered by this. They didn't like this. Actually, you read on in John 12, you'll see them saying to one another, behold, we've accomplished nothing. The whole world is gone after him. They tried to destroy him, and the whole world is gone after him. They even come to Yahshua and say, hey, tell these people to quit saying that. Quit saying what? Blessed is he that comes in the name of Yahweh. They didn't think the name ought to be spoken, and here crowds are shouting it. Quit, tell them to stop. What did Yahshua say? Say again, Marie. If they shut up, you ain't going to like it. Because the rocks are going to start crying out. Right? Point again being verse 12. This is on the 10th day of the first month. He's going into Jerusalem. He's going to Jerusalem on purpose on that day. And that day is the 10th day of the first month. Why is he going to Jerusalem? And what's he going to do there on the 10th day of the first month? We're going to go to Mark chapter 11 now. And let Mark tell us why he went there and what he's doing. And they brought the coat to Yahshua and cast their garments on him, and he sat upon him. Many spread their garments in the way, and others cut down branches off the trees and strawed them in the way. And they that went before and they that followed cried, saying, Hosanna, blessed is he that comes in the name of Yahweh. Blessed be the kingdom of our father David that comes in the name of Yahweh. Hosanna in the highest. And Yahshua entered into Jerusalem and into the temple. And when he looked round about upon all things, and now the eventide was come, he went out into Bethany with the 12. Do you see what he did? He went into the temple and stayed there all day and looked upon all things. That bit of information is so awesome. When Yahshua came to be baptized, Yochanan the baptizer, we know him as John the Baptist, but Yochanan the baptizer saw him coming and said, Behold, the Lamb of Yahweh. Whew. That takes away the sin of the world. Behold, the Lamb of Yahweh. He recognized and acknowledged that Yahshua is Yahweh's Lamb. At Passover, what do you got to do with your lamb on the 10th day of the first month? Exodus 12:3 says, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. In keeping with this command, in keeping with this pattern, Yahweh had to bring his lamb into his house on that day. Whew. And the lamb he had chosen was without spot and was without blemish. That's not an insignificant detail. This is just one of the many proofs that Yahshua is the promised Messiah. He always fits the patterns of the Moedim exactly and precisely. Let's continue on with information that we're given. Mark tells us that when the eventide, actually it says the hour, was come, he left the temple. He left Jerusalem and returned to Bethany. Mark then gives us these details beginning in verse 12. Mark 11, verse 12. And on the morrow, when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry. All right, Mark's giving us a timeline. What day would that be? Go ahead. 11, thank you. So we're on Abib 11. Seeing a fig tree afar off, having leaves, he came if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of figs was not yet. And Yahshua answered and said unto it, No man eat fruit of you hereafter forever. And his disciples heard it. So on the 11th day of the first month, he cursed the fig tree. Read on in Mark 11 and you'll find out that after he had done that on his way to Jerusalem, but after he'd done that, he went into the temple. Remember, we're told on the 10th day when he went into the temple, what did he do? You remember?
Observed it.
There you go. It's that simple. He just sat there and looked around upon it. It says all things. He didn't like what he saw. He's there as the lamb to be examined, but the lamb is examining them. And he didn't like what he saw. And when he got up on the 11th, he knew what he had to do. That poor little fig tree. That poor little fig tree. It wasn't even the time for figs. Yahshua's on his way to Jerusalem to take care of business. The lamb who was without blemish was about to correct a lot of blemishes he found inside the temple. Verse 15. And they came to Jerusalem, and Yahshua went into the temple and began to cast out them that sold and bought in the temple. And he overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and would not allow any man that should carry any vessel through the temple. Folks, that's bold. I'm going to say it this way. You going to do that, you got to be a man. Imagine somebody coming in here and trying to run us out. How effective would they be? Right? They better come big, right? He goes into the temple and starts turning tables over and running people out. We're told in another place he fashioned himself a whip. You don't do that in a few seconds. He sat down and worked on getting a whip together and went to using it on people and saying, "Get out! Get out!" And he run them out and restored order. And he sat down and began to teach. And these people had begun to treat the house of Yahweh, the temple of Yahweh, such disregard, they'd use it as a shortcut. They'd come in one gate and one door, and they'd just walk through and go out the other rather than going around. And so while he's teaching, he'd see somebody begin to do that, and he'd stop. "No! Get out of here!" That's bold. It bothers me when people portray our Messiah as some weak. I'll leave it at that. It bothers me. And he taught, saying unto them, "Is it not written," I'm in Mark 11:17, "My house shall be called of all nations a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves." Let that sink in. The temple had become a hideout for thieves. And many of them wore priestly attire. A den is a secluded place that serves as a shelter. Far too many men make the house of Yahweh their secluded place and shelter where they can make merchandise of people. Of such Peter said in 2 Peter 2:3, "Through covetousness shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingers not, and their damnation slumbers not." I like that. What Peter is saying, these people that come into Yahweh's house and have found a way to con them and deceive them and work money out of them, it may look like they're getting away with it and getting rich beyond measure. It may look like it, but Peter says their judgment's not idle, it's not lingering, and it's not asleep. Their judgment hadn't nodded off. He's saying, you just trust me, they're going to receive their judgment. The same Messiah who dealt with it harshly in Mark 11 still deals harshly with those who dare to use the Father's house for crooked financial gain by taking advantage of people whose heart is simply to serve Yahweh. Back to Mark 11, verse 18. "And the scribes and the chief priests heard it and sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him, because all the people were astonished at his doctrine. And when evening was come, he went out of the city." So, on Abib 10, he went to Jerusalem and sat in his father's house. In Abib 11, he returned to Jerusalem, cursed the fig tree, cleansed the temple, and sat down and taught. Verse 19 says, at evening he left Jerusalem, and he's going to return back to Bethany. Mark 11:20 says this, and in the morning, so let's do some more math. What day would that be? The 12th. On the 12th day of the first month, they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up by the roots. And Peter, calling to remembrance, said unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which you cursed is withered away. And Yahshua answered, said unto them, have faith in Yahweh. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he says shall come to pass, he'll have whatsoever he says. Therefore I say to you, what things soever you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. A lot of details are given to us about what happened or what transpired on this 12th day of the month of Abib. We have here, I just read it, Yeshua's great discourse on faith and how faith works here in Mark chapter 11. At the end of chapter 11, Yeshua is walking through the temple, and the chief priests, scribes, and Pharisees, he's in the temple again on this 12th day, and the chief priests, scribes, and elders come up to him and says, by what authority did you do what you did? In other words, you caused a ruckus in here yesterday. It's different in here today than it was yesterday. By what authority did you do that? How do you answer them? Do what? Ask them a question. I'll answer your question, but you answer me one first. By what authority did John the Baptist baptize? This is when you know you're dealing with deceitful, wicked people. They got huddled up and said, well, if we say that he did it of men, the people will hate us, might stone us. But if we say that John did it with the authority of heaven, then he's going to say to us, then why didn't you listen to him? And so their answer was, we cannot tell. And he said, well, then neither will I tell you. In chapter 12, he tells the chief priests, scribes, and elders a parable in which he likened them to tenant farmers who killed the landowner's son so that they could possess the land for themselves. Didn't take them long to figure out that the parable was about them, and so they got angry and wanted to kill him even more. On Abib 12, it was on that day that the Sadducees came to him with their question about the resurrection and the woman who had 7 husbands that died. That happened on the 12th day of Abib. It was on the 12th day of Abib that a lawyer came to him and said, which is the greatest commandment? And then, as I said, he was in the temple on this 12th day. It says he taught many other things as he sat in the temple. He draws attention while he's in the temple on the 12th day to a woman casting in 2 mites into the treasury. He also teaches on the coming destruction of the temple, the abomination of desolation, and the signs of the coming of the Son of Man. So the point is, on Abib 12, which is covered from Mark 11, verse 20 to Mark 14, verse 11, there are a lot of details given to us about what he did on that day. Mark 10, he sits. Mark 11, he cleanses. Mark 12, it's now a place where teaching can take place. Then we read this in Mark 14, verse 3. And being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious, and she brake the box and poured it on his head. So that night, he went into the house of Simon the leper and had dinner. Sunset of that night would have began Abib 13. The next marker we have is in Mark chapter 14, verse 12. And the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said unto him, Where will you that we go and prepare that you may eat the Passover? Don't let the wording there confuse you. It does not say that this was the first day of unleavened bread. It says the first day of unleavened bread when they killed the Passover. Also, don't let that wording bother you. Passover and unleavened bread cannot be separated. We separate them. And though they are two, they're still one. They're connected with an unbreakable bond. The point Mark's making here in chapter 14 is that day was coming. The day of Passover and unleavened bread, when the lamb is slaughtered, that day is coming. So his disciples said to Yahshua, we got to make ready. Here it is, the 13th day. We've got to make ready. Where do you want us to do that? Once sunset begins, Habib 14 begins. Yahshua sent them into Jerusalem, where they would find a room already furnished and prepared, where they were to make ready for him. I'm going to read that beginning in verse 13. He sent forth two of his disciples, said unto them, Go ye into the city, there shall meet you a man bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him. And wheresoever he shall go in, you say to the goodman of the house, The master says, Where's the guest chamber where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples? That lets you know some supernatural things are taking place. This man had an unction from on high, a prompting from the Ruach HaKodesh to get a room ready. He didn't really know why, but he knew he was supposed to get a room ready. And so when the disciples come into his house and said, The master said, Where's the guest chamber? He'll show you a large upper room furnished and prepared. There make ready for us. And his disciples went forth, came into the city, found as he had said unto them, and they made ready the Passover. And in the evening he came with the 12. So, let me go over it again. Abib 10, he makes his triumphant entry and goes into his father's house, just like the pattern declares he must. On Abib 11, he cursed the fig tree, cleansed the temple. Abib 12, he went into the temple and taught many things and answered a lot of questions. On Abib 13, the only thing we're really told is that he sent his disciples to make an upper room ready for Passover. We're in Abib 13 right now. And this is precisely what several ladies from our assembly did today. They came here to a room that was prepared, and they made ready. They set the tables up, they decorated, they got the chafing dishes clean, they got everything laid out. They've got it ready for us to partake of Passover on the 13th day of the first month. Mark 14:17 says that when evening was come, Yahshua came with the 12 into that room. That would be the beginning of Abib 14. And here we are. Evening is coming. And we're here with Yahshua. I know that because he said, wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. So as Abib 14 is coming upon us, we are here just as they were there. What are we going to do on this night? Well, we're going to do what they did. And we're going to reflect on what Yahshua did. What did they do? Mark 14, verse 22. And as they did eat, Yahshua took bread and blessed and brake it and gave to them and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." And he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank of it. And he said unto them, "This is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many. Verily I say to you, I'll drink no more of the fruit of the vine until that day that I drink it new in the kingdom of Yahweh." To do what they did when they did what they did, we had to meet tonight and take of the bread and of the wine. So that's what we're going to do. And we're also going to reflect on what Yahshua did. John 13 tells us that on that night, he washed his disciples' feet. It also tells us that he revealed knowledge, his knowledge, of what Judas was going to do. He wasn't in the dark about that. On that night, he revealed to Peter that he knew Peter was going to deny him. To Peter's protest, but he said, "You're going to deny me. But I have prayed for you." On this night, he prayed that awesome prayer found in John chapter 17, where he not only prayed for them, but he prayed for you. And he prayed for me. "Oh, Father, I want them to know that you love them as you have loved me." Wow. "Glorify me with the glory which I had with you before the world was." That awesome prayer where he says, "I have finished the work which you gave me to do. I have declared and manifested unto them your name." What a prayer. Then it says they sang a hymn. And then they went out into the Garden of Gethsemane, where he asked his disciples to watch and pray. How good were they at doing that? Not very. He'd come back and find them asleep and chastise them. "Could you not watch for 1 hour?" He'd go off, come back, and they'd be asleep again. We're told the third time he came back and found them asleep, he didn't even wake them. He just sat down there with them, said more to himself than to them, "Sleep on." And he watched over them. It was on this night that is coming that Judas led a band of men that the chief priests and elders had given to him. He led them into the garden to betray and arrest Yahshua. It's on this night that he betrayed Yahshua with a kiss. Yahshua is arrested, bound, and carried to Ananias. Ananias was the father-in-law of the chief priest Caiaphas. After some time with Ananias, Ananias has him led to Caiaphas, the high priest, and to the elders. They question him, they strike him, they bring false witnesses in who are paid to testify against him. All of that is going to happen on this night. The night we're here to commemorate. And as the morning comes, they take him bound from the high priest and deliver him to the judgment hall. Their hypocrisy is astounding. They drag Yahshua into the judgment hall, but they themselves will not go into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled by being in the presence of the Gentile. They are seeking the murder of an innocent man by paying false witnesses to testify against him. They know he's innocent. They're trying to have him murdered, but their hypocrisy is, we don't want to defile ourselves by being in among the Gentiles. So they wouldn't go into the judgment hall. So Pilate has to come out there to where they are. And Pilate says to them, what crime has he done? And their answer, if he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him to you. Always beware of somebody who won't answer your questions. Just trust us. If he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him here. Pilate goes in and examines him, interrogates him, finds no fault in him, seeks to release him, but the chief priests, elders, and the people demand that he be crucified. So Pilate scourges him. A crown of thorns is placed on his head. He's mocked, struck, made fun of. And by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, he will be nailed to a stake. Just as Exodus chapter 12 required. He will be slaughtered between the evenings. He'll bow his head and give up his spirit at 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. And we'll meet back here tomorrow at 5:30 to commemorate the Lamb of Yahweh who took away the sins of the world. And give thanks for an Elohim who loved us so much. But I'm hoping that we'll reflect on this crucifixion week and we'll see how precise the pattern is. I hope that we'll see that if the first 4 feasts were fulfilled precisely as they revealed they would be, that it will make us embrace the last 3 more than we ever have before and realize they are showing us a pattern of the coming of our Messiah and the day of judgment. I hope we'll reflect and be aware that while we sleep tonight, he will be arrested, bound, and attacked with hatred beyond measure. I hope that tomorrow when we awake, we'll reflect on what he endured on this day for us all. And I hope that we'll return tomorrow afternoon, with a renewed love and admiration for our Messiah and a renewed dedication to serve him. And I hope that tonight as we take the bread and wine, you're fully aware of what was taking place the night that Yahshua initiated this event that we call communion. He knew he was being betrayed. He knew he would be forsaken. He knew he would not be there the next day to eat the Passover meal with his disciples. And yet he spent this night serving them, making sure they were okay. What a Savior. What a high priest who can be touched with the feelings of our infirmities.